Welcome to the U.S. Judiciary class. This is CRJ 6700. It's a required class for criminal justice students, and some of you might be in it because you're interested in pursuing law school, or you might want to do the Law and Society major at John Jay, or you might be a liberal arts student and you're exploring your options. So I want to go over just kind of what we're doing in this course and get into some of the details of how to do it. And give you just a basic overview of what we're getting into. So what you'll see on Blackboard as soon as you log in is you'll see a folder that says Student Resources. And so if you click in that folder, each of these different categories here, course support, life support, and engagement, these are all clickable links that'll take you to a web page and tell you more about that option or that resource. I want to highlight three that I think are important that you should know about right off the bat, and that is the Student Union and Intercultural Center. We're going to be working with the director of that center, Helen Margaret Nasser, and she's designed some assignments along with me this semester, and we're testing those out to see how they work, so please do let us know. There's also the Access Resource Center, which provides a large variety of free services, anywhere from tax preparation to legal consultation to benefits screening. It's just a very supportive and useful place, and you can say hi to my friend Hattie Elmer, who is the director of that program. And then finally, I want to bring your attention to the Career Center, and that's you can talk to my friend Marisa Joseph there, and that's a great place if you want to start thinking about the future and you want to start thinking about getting into the criminal justice field as a career. You should start talking to her, filling out the paperwork, looking for internships or any opportunities that kind of give you a better idea of what that field is all about. If you have any other questions or if you have any other resources that you'd like me to help you with, feel free to email me. And then also you can see that they all have social media as well. So like I said, we're going to be working with Helen Margaret Nasser, who's the director of the Student Union. She's interested in working with you to design assignments that bring the real world into your coursework, so making it as applicable to you as possible and as relevant to your experiences. She offers a lot of stuff, so speakers, movie screenings, field trip, workshops, trainings, on-campus jobs, student publications, and probably more. You should keep an eye on your email because you'll usually get notices there, but you can also go to U113 right across from the cafeteria. There's usually SUIC events going on there, or you can go to the website and figure out what you want to do from there. She wants you to know that she cares about you. She's got a program called You Belong Here. It's really targeting people who maybe don't feel like they belong, or feel like they've been discriminated against, or that their particular belief system or their background isn't being recognized. It also applies to folks who might be the first in their family to go to college, or a single parent, or maybe you've got an immigration status that doesn't fit neatly into a box that the college knows how to work with. And so she's got kind of a program that allows you to kind of explore your options and your resources in a way that's respectful of who you are. She's also got a number of other programs like the Undocu Ally training, interfaith training, so you definitely want to focus your energy on doing as many of those things as you can, because it does help you get grounded and kind of get on your feet. So as for the course itself, like I said, you'll log into Blackboard, and what you should see is that the weeks of work are organized by folder. So you just click in the folder and then all your work is right there. I kind of also give you a preview of the outline because you'll see that in the syllabus, and so you kind of see they correspond, right? So everything you see in the outline is then going to be inside that folder. Now more specifically, we're looking at this concept called green criminology. It kind of combines environmental concerns and criminal justice concerns into one way of thinking about things. And we're going to examine that through two concepts of social movements, which I think you're all pretty familiar with, right? Groups of people that get together and they want to work on a common cause. And then this thing called the myth of rights. And what the myth of rights is that on the one hand, some people say rights are good, they're great because people start talking about rights, they start organizing, they get together and they say, we've got a shared purpose here, let's go ahead and tell our story and move forward. On the other hand, however, right, that's kind of out in the world. When the rights enter into the courtroom setting, they really get limited into judicial interpretations, right? So only kind of what fits within the formal legal narrative is what stays, and then kind of all these other meanings that people have kind of fall away. So a lot of people in the field that I work in law and society, they argue for something called legal pluralism, right? That the court should be more open-minded, and they should be able to, address multiple meanings of justice and rights and fairness. But we want to think about, how might a criminal organization and corporations who want to break the law, how do they take advantage of this fragmented situation where on the one hand, folks are trying to organize and make social change using rights and using law, but on the other hand, law is kind of limiting what change can be made. How do the organizations take advantage of that? And so we're going to look at real life case studies, and we're going to look at actual social movements of real human beings that I've brought into this class experience and I've talked with, and talk about how they address it. And so you'll be able to see how laws work and how they don't work. And you'll see that at different levels of both the criminal justice system, meaning at the policing and the corrections level, but also at the legal systems, the multiple tiers or the three levels that you want to think about in the legal system. Now, some things to think about is oftentimes, there might be a law, there might be a regulation, there might be a prohibition, but they're very difficult to enforce, especially when we're talking about international criminal organizations and international corporations. It also might not be a government priority, right? If you turn on the news or you go on your social media, oftentimes you'll see politicians talk very vaguely about crime, right? They're not saying we're specifically going to put $1 million to confront this crime, right? They're never very specific when they're talking, and so if it's not a government priority, then enforcement's not going to happen. The other issue you want to think about is that the courts, while they're very well educated in legal history, they're not very well educated about environmental issues, about corporations, about criminal organizations, about international law, treaties, right? The scientific concepts, right? There's a lot of things they don't know, and so we want to think about how can that information get into the courtroom to make sure that judges are making better decisions. And then oftentimes government officials and politicians simply ignore the legal obligations of enforcing crime control measures is because the public doesn't seem to care, right? They maybe they don't know what's going on, they're not paying attention, they're way too into themselves. They're very much into their social media platforms, but they're not really paying attention to what's going on in their neighborhood. So you can't expect government officials and politicians to care either, right? If there's no pressure being put on politicians, they'll mostly focus on themselves too. And so you want to think about what this means then. Criminal organizations can kind of just do what they want if people aren't really paying attention. So when you think about learning here, we want to think about, you're starting at this benchmark side, this left side, and you might try to get to milestone 1. That'd be fine, that'd be good, you'd get a good grade in this class. And you might try to move to milestone 2. If this is your last semester, which some of you this might be, you should really try to be integrating your experiences. So how do your courses, especially in criminal justice, start to come together in this course, and how can you use those skills and knowledge that you've gained so far into your responses and into your answers. But again, right, it's okay if you're starting here on the left-hand side and you're just kind of starting to think about these things and how they relate to everyday life, and then you're going to start to try to analyze and be able to start to identify really specific things instead of being general. So how are we going to do that? We have several units, right? So in the first few readings and assignments, you're just going to be learning about civic engagement, these concepts I've been talking about now. You're going to have a fairly difficult reading from the very beginning, but I did see that one student has started and seems to be doing great with it. So, take your time, and we're just really trying to introduce kind of two concepts to you. One is this difficulty of just understanding that the legal system, for better or for worse, that was designed by the founders or the framers, really drew upon the Greeks and the Romans. And so the argument here is that you should probably know something about the Greeks and the Romans. But we give you a reading from a pretty well-known author, postmodernist, Virginia Woolf, who struggled to read and learn Greek and kind of wondered why she had to. But then she comes around to explain what lessons she learned, and you could start to think about those are the lessons also that the framers and the designers of the legal system. And I'll let you know, every judge that's sitting on those benches, they know these stories, right? And most of the lawyers, myself included, right, we studied Greek and Roman mythology. We studied Greek political arguments. I mean, lots of stuff that go back to the Greeks. And so you need to know it, but we're not going to get so heavy into it. I just want to introduce you to the ideas. And then you can start to think about how criminal justice and civic engagement go together, right? And you'll start to think about what this has to do with the myth of rights, and how green criminology is kind of one area that you might not have known anything about. And so what does that say about what we were saying about public ignorance, right? And as you start to learn about it, how would you share this information with other people? And there's a framework that you're going to use that's going to help you think about that from your perspective, as well as how you might work with other people. And then we're just going to move along, right? So then we'll look at green criminology a lot more in depth. You're going to get the definition of it. You're going to be able to apply it to some topics, and you'll get some examples. Then we're going to look at the problem of what's called crimmigration, which is criminalizing immigration. We're going to compare that within this idea of environmental disaster and climate refugees. And so you'll see how these two worlds now kind of come together, green criminology and crimmigration, and especially in how human trafficking and how criminal organizations use this environmental problem to further their own profits. And then you're going to start to see how multiple crises or multiple conflicts within criminal justice can kind of come together, and then what social movements do about that, right? So it's not like these bad things happen and everybody just says, oh, well, there's nothing I can do. No, they start to organize and they start to think about their rights and start to make progress. So you're going to get some examples of people who are doing that here in New York City, as well as their connections to the global community, including South Africa and Haiti, are two examples of people that I know that are doing that kind of work. And so you're going to learn about what they're doing. And then finally, you're going to be asked to kind of start to synthesize this. And by synthesize, we mean, you start to bring multiple things together and bring them into one kind of package. And so we call that integrative learning. So you're going to define integrative learning. Hopefully, you're going to memorize those outcomes. And then you're going to start to work on an action project. I'll talk about it in a little bit. That's going to bring all these things together and produce a one-page summary of what you did, and kind of building on the assignments that you have up to that point. And then so from there on out, it's going to be mostly just working on these little assignments that help you get to that final stage. So oftentimes people want to know about grading, right? And so there's the grading scale here. If you do the math, you'll see that there's a lot more points possible than I'm using in the grading analysis, right? So I'm trying to make it as fair as possible. Some things you're not going to be able to do. Some things you're not going to be able to do well, right? Life happens in class. So I want to give you lots of opportunities. The one thing that you're going to have to do really well over time are the reading annotations, which I'm going to get into in a second. But there's a lot of them, and so it allows you to kind of get better and better and better at it. At basis, right, you're just doing 7 annotations. Annotations is like a really fancy word for a comment, right? So you're going to comment on the reading, but you're going to use these codes down here. So if you have a question, you put a Q and then you type your question. If you're surprised by something, you put an S and then you explain why you're surprised by it. Students a couple semesters ago said they wanted to add L, which means they really loved something. And so, I added it here. If you have some other reaction that you think would be useful for students this semester in the future, we can add that as well. There's also, as you can see here, an extra credit assignment towards the end of the semester worth 50 points. So that's really kind of for two types of students, right? It's for students who are maybe struggling most of the semester and they really need to catch up, right? Or else they're not going to pass the class. Here's an assignment for you, right? This is going to help bring you back into the passing grade and help you kind of maybe get your confidence back. But it could also be for students who are doing really well in the course and they really just want to make sure that they get the best grade they can, okay? And so I just want to make this like very clear that I'm trying to make it as easy as possible for you to get, a passing grade. So the annotations, again, like I said, you would do 7 of them. 5 of them are general comments about the reading, and then 2 of them I want you to respond to other students' comments. And so you'll see this little arrow here is reply, and so you click that and you reply to one of the students. So maybe if a student asks a question, maybe you try to give an answer, right? Maybe you try to see if you can figure it out. But the goal here is that, again, like you'll start to get better and better at this as the readings go on. And what this does is it shows me what you understand and what you're struggling with, and so I can kind of address those. I can make videos like this for students if I see 6 or 7 students are struggling with a concept. But it also helps you guys engage with each other, and so you start to learn from each other. And I think it's very useful. It's proven. I've been using this now for about 2 years, and students are getting better and better at it. which means I either am getting better and better, or students are just getting better and better at online learning. Either way, it's been very useful. It also allows you to ask me questions, right, as you're going through something like the syllabus or you're going through a reading, and then I can answer those questions back to you. So you definitely want to check back and see what myself and what other people might be saying to your comments and questions. We're also going to have discussion boards, and these over the last couple semesters I think have been really great. I guess maybe I'm asking better questions than I used to, but students are doing a really good job, I think, of bringing their knowledge in, bringing their reactions in, and sometimes bringing research, right, that they found and sharing that with students in class. And so I'm just showing you how the two things kind of relate. You do the two readings, you do the annotations, and then guess what? You're going to talk about those in the discussion board. This will really help everybody get a good sense of what's going on that week. There's also going to be these very brief civic engagement activities with Director Helen Margaret Nasser. And usually there'll be some videos that go along with it that kind of just bring everything back into context, and we try to now show you how it applies to everyday life. And then this is not something you have to look at, but as you're doing your action research or the essay that you're going to do in this class, maybe you want some references, right, some citations. And so what I've done is at the end of each unit, I've included some of the references that basically go with the readings and go with the videos, so that you don't necessarily have to search around forever. You could use these and start to get information here. You are of course free to get stuff that you find, but I just wanted to make sure you had this option and it was there available for you. Now the action research project probably seems a little overwhelming, right? So I want to try to break it down, and I've got a picture here I found on the internet that maybe makes it a little bit better. But remember, I've got an annotation assignment there, so when you have questions or you're surprised about something in the instructions, make sure you get those questions in, and so then I can address those for the whole class. But basically it's pretty simple. You're going to choose a criminal justice problem in your community. I give you the definition of integrative learning, so in your project you'll define integrative learning. It'd be great if you paraphrased it in one sentence, and then you're going to apply the definitions that you learned throughout the units, right? And then you're going to apply those, or you're going to synthesize those to apply to your project. And there's going to be three elements you're going to be focusing on. You're going to be thinking about the environment, animals, and humans as their relationships. You're going to be thinking about crime and focus on especially the harm that's caused by that environmental crime. And then you're going to focus on what the injustice is. How does it get addressed? How does it not, right? How are the courts helping? How are they not, right? You want to really think about that. And all you have to really do, you'll do all that research, right? You probably take notes, but all you have to actually turn in is a one-page summary. So I don't want it to be overwhelming. I just want to show you the process of how we do action research, which is pretty simple, right? You identify a problem, you examine that problem, you act on that problem, and then you reflect on that problem. So your act here is the one-page summary sheet. You're going to see what everybody else does, and that's going to be your reflection time. And so it's really just getting you to get into that process and that habit. And it's definitely something, if you transfer to John Jay, you're gonna see this again. So I wanted to make sure you got kind of an introduction to this type of research. And if that also still sounds overwhelming, what I've done is I've broken up some of the assignments that you're doing part of the research in different weeks. So for example, in week 3, you're going to share some notes that you've come up with, and I've got some links here that show you how best to do that. And I'd prefer you use Google Docs. Make sure you share it with me, give me permission to be editor. But then also you could use a Word doc if you really need to, and just email it to me. And then in week 5, you're going to do it again, but you're going to kind of just start your research process, right? So I'm breaking it down into little steps so that we can kind of keep you on task and make sure that you're managing your time and your work effectively. Now that's going to lead up to a draft of an essay, 5 pages, double spaced, so it's not a big one. But basically you've got some context here, and then you've got some instructions. It's going to be due October 22nd, so something to think about. Just kind of plan that out. And basically it's really just for the draft. It's just kind of showing me what research you've come up with. And this is obviously, as you can see, similar to the action research project. So again, this is kind of part of building up to that. And then you're going to do a revision based on my feedback that you're going to give me no later than December 14th, which is about 2 months later. And then again, just to show you, right, so in week 5, we're going to ask for a reflection. So you'll just kind of be thinking about what you've learned so far. It's a great time to to, as you're reflecting, also take some of the maybe the best hits of your discussion board post and go ahead and put those into your notes and think about using those for your essay and for your action research one-page sheet. And then again, we're going to do a very brief blog post that's worth 15 points. That's going to go in your Google Notes. That's going to show me that you're able to apply this kind of last theoretical part. I'm not giving you a lot of theory at the beginning. I'm going to see, I'm going to have you build up to it, and then you're going to see if you can apply the theoretical framework. And again, this just allows me to see how you're able to do it so that I can help you better. So you're going to have discussion board 1 coming up here, and I showed you a picture here of all the discussion boards. Pretty simple. All you have to do is respond to the prompt. Make sure you're following the instructions by carefully reading what the prompt is asking you to do. It's always a good idea to use course materials, use the readings, and to really also make sure that you, in order to get full credit, all 5 points, you need to respond to another student. This should not be a response that says, hey, I like what you said, right? That's not going to get you 5 points. You need to be building on it and having a dialogue with them. Okay, and then last but not least, right, what am I doing now, right? So here's week 1 work, right? You're going to start with the survey, pretty quick, not really all that difficult. We're just asking you to join us in helping us better understand how students manage this work and what you think about it. Then you're going to move on to the syllabus. You're going to annotate, you're going to do 5 comments plus 2 responses to other students. Then you're going to have 2 readings, very short, they're not very long. And you're going to do the same thing again, 5 comments on each and then 2 responses to a student. Then you're going to do your discussion board, which I kind of already showed you about the Virginia Woolf reading. And then there's a very brief assignment. So it seems like a lot of things, but you'll knock them out pretty quickly, and then you'll move on to week 2. And so you'll see I give you a little extra time for week 1 because everybody kind of gets settled in, and right, you got to get kind of everything in order and start focusing again. But then again, week 2 will be due by the 24th. That gets us back on track. And then week 3 is October 1st, right? So the earlier you get week 1 done, then you can move on to week 2, move on to week 3, etc. It is okay to get ahead. So I'm looking forward to seeing your work, and please do let me know if there's anything you need. Email is jason.leggett@kbcc.cuny.edu. Thanks. Bye.